demonstrations been held outside Streatham Hill Theatre as part of a campaign to stop the Grade 2 listed venue being sold to developers.
The most extraordinary building, I mean, it's huge. It seats just under 3,000 people, I think.
And one only has to visit something like the entrance hall today to get a glimpse of how palatial the building was.
A lot of local people might walk past thinking it's just a bingo hall. They don't realise the scale and the beauty of the place inside.
But somewhere that size, I think to lose it would be an absolute crime when there are so many potential uses for it.
It just made me think, you know, gosh, what did we have then? And what could we have again?
London has always been the undisputed heart of theatre culture, admired by millions across the globe. On the edges of the city are dozens of world-class theatres that were once cherished but are now lying derelict. This is the story of how one of the largest theatres in Britain, the Streatham Hill Theatre, has slowly perished in the face of changing taste and squeezed public finances, and how a group of impassioned local residents is fighting for its revival. On the outskirts of South London and Streatham is a Sleeping Beauty, a lavish Grade 2 listed theatre designed and built in the late 1920s by WGR Sprague, the architect responsible for designing some of the most stunning theatres in London.
This was one of the largest theatres outside the West End of London. It could seat over 2,000 people and had a stage of sufficient size to take many of the leading West End shows, which could be transferred quite easily from the theatres in the West End to the Streatham Hill Theatre.
Streatham Hill Theatre closed its doors for theatrical performances in 1962, around 60 years ago, and since then the theatre was used for playing bingo and staging small events and amateur productions by the community right up until January 2017. As of 2022, Mercure Casino, a company that runs gaming and leisure venues across the UK, operates a slot machine launch just in a tiny section of this massive structure. But to protect this historic beauty from crumbling down, the Friends of Streatham Hill Theatre, a volunteer-run charity campaign group, aims to save and reawaken her for the benefit of the community.
The bingo actually had to close down in 2017 because of there weren't getting enough people coming in to play bingo. So at that point there was a risk that the theatre might close. There was concern from local people that, you know, it might get replaced by flats, but certainly also that we'd lost access to the theatre. So that kind of triggered the campaign.
The fight to get this theatre up and running is not as easy as it seems. With private owners like Paul Mount, head leaseholders Mecca and sub-leaseholders in the mix, campaigners have an uphill task. In 2018, they tried getting the buildings leased from the owners once, but were not treated seriously.
At that point we decided we needed to try and do things to help save the theatre, so we applied for Asset of Community Value status for the theatre, which involved putting an application into London Borough of Lambeth and make the case that the building has been serving the community for a number of years and it could do so going forward.
If you walk into the main auditorium, it's wow. Literally the scale of it, the beauty of it, just looking at the wonderful decoration, and you know, it's really evocative of a bygone age. And it's like, this is a huge, wonderful space. It's in great condition. The seats are still usable. The last time I went in there was for actually a site-specific piece that had been put on by the then manager from Beacon Bingo, who used the bingo tables as part of the play. And it was fabulous. It was almost as though the theatre was going, oh, wow, I'm being used for my purpose again. There were tears in people's eyes, actually, that this was being used as a performance space once again.
Since the inception of this campaign, a number of renowned patrons, including Paul Merton, Robert Glenister, and Oscar-winning actor Sir Mark Rylance, have lent their support to this effort. Despite the fact that people don't have access to the theatre, Hustle star Robert Glenister reckons it is still functional in many ways.
I mean, the only thing that's really changed is is in the stalls. It's probably, I don't know what it is now, but it was just full of bingo tables. But the two upper levels, the circles, were still intact. The stage machinery, they still got a working trap door, which is called a pantomime trap, which if you were doing Aladdin or something like that, you get whoever was playing the genie under the stage on this trap, and this thing would just lift up, so all of a sudden it'd appear in a puff of smoke. They've still got stuff like that there. They've still got all the old. So I think as a sort of as a historical venue, it's worth preserving. And I think if it can be preserved as a historical venue and as a performing venue as well, then best of both worlds.
But in order to enjoy the best of both worlds, one must first recognize what one already has. The irony is that most people in Streatham are ignorant of the gem in their possession, because most of them have seen this piece of history as a bingo hall, and the rest are unaware that this aesthetic theatre still holds the beauty and glory behind slot machines.
Well, I've always known that that building was Streatham Hill Theatre. When I first moved in, my ex-father-in-law was an actor-manager, a producer, director, and wrote plays, and had a play on not at Streatham Hill Theatre but another theatre right next to it. And when we first moved in, he talked a lot about Streatham Hill Theatre and his memories of it from the 1940s and into the 1950s. So I was aware that that was a theatre, but I'd always assumed it had taken over by bingo, that it had been a theatre that was in the past. I assumed, I never went to the bingo when it was a bingo hall, I assumed the whole of the inside had been gutted, and it was just the facade and the memory and the history of what it had been. And it was only in getting involved with the Friends of Streatham Hill Theatre that I discovered that it's almost completely untouched inside. It still is there as an existing theatre with all of the amazing architecture and that history and the feel for how it was as a theatre. All that's happened is the seats and the stalls have been taken out, so that the bingo could happen there. And so it's been really recent that I've discovered actually it's still an existing theatre. It's just not being used as a theatre at the moment, and that's a very different thing.
It's not just the structure that has lost its identity behind bingo, it's also the history that has been squandered.
Shows like South Pacific, Can, Oklahoma, all the big shows of the day were transferred to the Streatham Hill Theatre as part of their provincial runs. And they saw actors taking part in performances there who were at the very early stages of their career. People like Michael Caine, Sean Connery, who went on to be James Bond, they all performed at the Streatham Hill Theatre.
Streatham Hill Theatre played host to royalties, Hollywood stars, and has held the largest and most successful shows of its time. But a disaster was waiting at its door.
It wasn't until 1944 that it was hit by a flying bomb known as a doodlebug, and the interior of it was so severely damaged it couldn't be used. The theatre therefore was closed. However, in the late 1940s, the theatre was rebuilt and it was refurbished internally at considerable expense, and it opened in December 1951 with a pantomime called Cinderella.
The theatre survived a direct hit from a flying bomb in World War II, but couldn't bear the brunt of television advent. Theatre attendance began to ebb with a new spate of life for theatre as a bingo hall until 2017.
It is unlikely that it's going to be a return to its glory days as a magnificent, huge theatre as it was in the 1930s. However, the future as perhaps a slightly smaller theatre, with the site being used for other uses, is a possibility.
And that's why the campaigners are proactive and have harnessed strong support from the community, Theatre Trust and the council.
So we've been supporting the campaign group, the Friends of Streatham Hill Theatre, to develop viability studies and economic impact studies to demonstrate potentially innovative uses for this building in the future. We want to see this building retained for the community and not turned into some other use such as housing.
Many young people are also participating in this project, and they wish to refurbish and relaunch the theatre for multi-purpose. Armeet Panesar, Friends of Streatham Hill Theatre's lead architect, has already proposed a future design summary for the theatre.
The auditorium space in the middle could be even broken down with a pop-up theatre in the middle for smaller performances. And these are all usable spaces that we kind of see as a big part of helping to support the economic viability of the auditorium. It's obviously a very large venue, it's 2,800 seats. It's going to be very difficult to always fully fill that venue all the time, which is why we've highlighted all these spaces as ways to kind of keep the building always operational all the time.
In 2020, the campaign group also raised funds to complete a viability study which confirmed that restoration and phased reuse of the theatre as a leisure and entertainment venue is a viable proposal and would generate footfall, jobs and economic growth, adding over £70 million to the local economy over 30 years. But what's getting in the way of this plan?
We do know that the owners have investigated the possibility of demolishing the stage and the dressing room block at the rear and putting up a block of flats, 24 flats at the back of the theatre, which would leave a theatre without a stage or any dressing rooms. So, a theatre without a stage or dressing rooms is not a theatre.
Theatres Trust, the national advisory public body for theatres in the United Kingdom, believes that the local council is the only saviour in this case. But at present, Lambeth lacks the money to invest in a theatre due to budget cuts.
So it's crucial that the ownership of the building is acquired basically by a private company or by the council under compulsory purchase so that these wonderful ideas can come to fruition. And that's the crux of the problem at the moment. There's a massive will in the community to do something. We could raise funds from various sources if we actually had ownership of the building. But because we don't, or the community doesn't, then lots of avenues are closed that would spring open were the ownership in the hands of people who wanted to regenerate it.
Only time will tell what the future holds for Streatham Hill Theatre, but in the midst of their efforts to revive this sleeping beauty, one cannot underestimate the relentless efforts of the friends.
I have nothing but praise for people like David, who has been working very, very hard in association with other groups like the Streatham Society and others to secure a viable, sustainable future for the theatre. And what he has done, and for which he should be congratulated, is he has helped maintain the theatre in its present state so that it is still available for a wide range of options to service the building.
And Friends of Streatham Hill Theatre have done an amazing job so far of creating that sense of urgency. This is at risk. We need to save this. And sometimes you need to shout about it before people pay attention. If Friends of Streatham Hill Theatre hadn't got involved, I'm sure, the theatre, the building, might have been just left to rack and ruin, to deteriorate to such an extent that there would be no option but to repurpose it in some other way.
They aim to bring this gorgeous theatre back to life as a multi-purpose arts, culture and entertainment centre for the community.
What we're specifically looking at Streatham Hill Theatre and what the campaign is trying to awaken is the idea of an arts hub. So it would have photography studios, it would have small galleries, it would have small art cinemas, it would have rehearsal spaces, working spaces that people can hire to have as office space in arts organisations, community spaces for local groups to be able to run community theatre, to try things out. It will have filming studios, so it will be an entire arts hub with cafes in it, so that's where somebody doing photography and somebody running the little local cinema or somebody rehearsing something or an artist in a studio can meet over coffee and meet local artists and people from around South London who are using it, a sort of community hub of artists coming together. And I think that's absolutely what we need to revive and to bring to life in this country at the moment, post-pandemic.
Though for some, this theatre is just one tale tucked away in a London suburb, but there are many locals who still have an unforgettable bond with it. For them, Streatham Hill Theatre was home, and the loss of this theatre would mean losing a part of their home.
I would be very sad if it did become another block of flats or a shopping centre or some such.
Maximising the available space in the building to all those different things, rather than just removing this unique large building and replacing it with something else just like the rest of them.
Basically, we had lost, as a town, we had lost all of our big entertainment venues.
It has been such a major and iconic part of the history and heritage of Streatham for now almost 100 years, that it would be wonderful if it could continue into its second century, playing such a large and active role in the life of the community as it did in its glory days.
I can't imagine it not being there.
As we completed the story, we heard that the theatre has been sold to a new landlord. It's not clear what the change will bring, but the friends hope it might be positive.